Hello and welcome back to the Ghostwriter channel. And in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about the 5-step process. There's actually some other steps that go in here, but it's a basic outline of what you can do if you're trying to write your own book or even an article. It's kind of the same process that you've got to follow. Now, I know sometimes people say, well, why are you doing this and trying to talk people out of ghostwriting services? Well, I'm not really. I'm trying to help people who might be trying to go about it on their own, but it's also to show how difficult the process is. And when people find out how difficult it is, that's usually when they end up wanting to hire a ghostwriter. But if you'd still like to go about it on your own, there are still some steps that can help the process go smoother. So step number 1, you want to come up with a single point for your book. So for instance, sometimes somebody might come up and say, well, I want to do a book on the stock market. Well, that's a pretty broad topic. Got over 100 years of history and a million different paths you could go down. What's it about? And if you just try to write about the stock market, you will inherently start going down some type of a path. Just your writing's going to naturally gravitate to some course, and you're going to find out that when you get to the end of the book that that's not really what you wanted. So let's not do that one. Let's get more refined. You might say, well, it's how to invest. Well, that's a little more focused, but it's still pretty broad. So let's see if we can refine it more. And you say, well, how to invest in mutual funds. Okay, that's better. And it's just to give you an idea that you want to think hard and drill down to a specific point. And a single point keeps your book focused. Your readers will appreciate it. Your point comes across much stronger because every single thing, every chapter, every paragraph, every sentence is focused around that single point. If you have far more points to make, that's great. Those are different books. Step number 2, you need to come up with an outline. I know nobody likes to do outlines. I used to hate doing them, but the more that you write, you'll find out that this is really the book. This doesn't mean you have to do the formal outline with Roman numerals and all kinds of indents and subparts A and double I and all of these different things. Make it simple. So for instance, we might say, what is a mutual fund? And then underneath that we have what are called subheads. These are just different paragraphs within the chapter. We might look at types of funds or ETFs, which are exchange traded funds. We might look at ETNs, which are exchange traded notes. So you might get to a different chapter that might be about opening an account. And you might want to do a subhead, what's a full service broker? What's a discount broker? But you get the idea. Your outline can just be this simple. And once you're looking at your Word document like this, the rest becomes easy because this is your GPS. It's telling you where you want to start and where you need to finish. Step number 3, write fast. I know it sounds opposite. You think you'd want to be very slow and methodical. We'll get to that. That is part of it. But when you're first getting your thoughts down, you want to write fast. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to type at 120 words per minute. You can be the slowest typist in the world and still be a fabulous writer. What I mean by this is don't worry about the order, grammar, rhythms, which we'll talk about in future videos, word choice, and things like that. It's just about getting your thoughts down. Fast writing allows for spontaneity and creativity. So just like if you're having a conversation with someone, you might say, gee, right in the middle of it, I went off in this different topic or an example that I never really thought about. But when you're going fast, those will all come about. And that's part of the writing process. We can always delete it later, but let's get it down on paper. Now, slow writing might create stellar sentences, but you'll forget where you were going. And here's what people do, is they'll write a sentence and then they'll stop and stew about it for a while and think about it and change and do what we call revising and editing just on the first sentence. And then they say, okay, that's a really good rock solid sentence. And then they go, I don't even remember what I was writing about. So again, think of it like a conversation. Just get your thoughts down. Don't stop and edit and think about whether it's grammatically correct or whether there are better word choices. Get your thoughts down on paper. That's what you want to do in this step. And what are those thoughts? Right off of your outline. So for example, let's say that you're doing a book or an article on personal finance, and your topic is about the abuse of insurance. There are certainly good uses for insurance, but there are also abuses, and that's what we're talking about here. So let's get the thoughts down. And we say insurance is easy to abuse. Stores always offer insurance at the cash register, but they're simply bad deals. Okay, it's grammatically correct, but there's nothing real stellar about it. That's fine. Get your thoughts down. Keep moving to the next thought, the next subhead, the next chapter. Now, here's where we get into step number 4, what's called the revision stage or revising. And this is perhaps the most important part of writing. Now that we've got the order, we've got our thoughts down on paper, now let's sit and think about how to make it rock solid. So here's where you want to think of better ways to say what's been written. The revising stages you will go through multiple times. So in this stage, you might rearrange sentences and paragraphs. You might say, well, I think this sentence actually should come before this one. And let's just cut and paste them, move them around. Or I like this paragraph before this one. Let's rearrange it. And that's easy to do once you have the thoughts down on paper. Trust me, there's nothing worse than looking at blank pages. You've got nothing to work with. If you at least have words, we can now start revising. And we might also lengthen some sentences, shorten some, or combine. These are things that we'll talk about in future videos that are called rhythms, and it's a really important part of writing. And this is what we're doing as part of the revision process. Now again, you're going to go through many revisions, but each time you do it, they're going to get fewer and fewer. So I sometimes call it a layering process. You're just working in layers. Each revision, you're just kind of like peeling away layers of that onion and trying to get better and better. You're simply polishing what's been written. So let's go back to our example here. We talked about the insurance and that it's easy to abuse. Well, why is it easy to abuse? What's the point? Well, we can do what's called a thesis topic. We can put one at the end of each sentence. I might say they're simply bad deals and they create big financial holes for consumers. So this is kind of the reason for reading it. They're bad deals and they're going to dig into your pocketbook. So rather than just saying that, hey, stores offer insurance and they're bad deals. And that's how a lot of people write. But then you're leaving the reader to work and say, well, what's an example? This is really just kind of bad or cheap writing if we left it right here. So let's do the work for the reader. Let's do some research. And so get online and maybe we find that at Office Depot, for instance, you can buy a verbatim 8 GB flash drive for $8.39. You can buy a 2-year investment protection plan for $1.99, which insures against failure. You can also buy an accidental protection plan for $6.99, which covers losses for any reason. Okay, so now we've got more words on paper. We're working in layers. Next time we go through a revision, we might do this. Let's kind of polish it up a bit. Yeah, we said you can buy this 8 GB flash drive for $8.39. Let's add, at checkout, the cheerful cashier will ask, would you like to protect your investment? Who could say no? Of course I want to protect my investment. And then we go on to talk about the 2-year investment plan. We say which covers losses for any reason, whether it's a manufacturing defect or your fault. In other words, what do they mean by any reason? Well, let's clarify it. It could be a manufacturing defect, or it could even be your fault. Well, but now let's add some creativity. The next time we go through the revision process, we might say, rather than saying it's your fault, maybe because your dog ate it. All right, now they understand it's for any reason at all, but it's a little more creative and adds some humor. But notice we're getting less and less red. The next time I might say, okay, that's still a little generic, let's polish it up some more. Instead of saying your dog ate it, let's say your chihuahua thought it was a chew toy. But you see the process. Each time that you go through, it's easy to pick out, kind of get nitpicky and look at little words and say, we could make it a little better. That's really easy to do when you've got words to look at. But it's super hard when you've got nothing but blank pages. So write fast, get your thoughts down, and then go through the revision process multiple times. The revision process is probably the most important of the entire book. Once you've done that, now you get to step 5, which is edit. And that's going to be looking at it with a critical eye. We're not revising, although sometimes you'll still find some things that need to be revised. But the editing is more about paying attention to details. You're looking at punctuation. You're asking, is it the right word? So for instance, I was just reading something the other day and the guy said, this is an unconscious thought. Well, it's not an unconscious thought. If you were unconscious, you wouldn't be thinking. It's a subconscious thought. So you have to get critical. You have to think about what exactly is the right word. Or even if it is the right word, or a right word, is there a better word? But this is more the editing stage. Be careful with pronouns. You see this a lot. Somebody will say, it's the very best way to invest. Well, what's it? You've just talked about 3 or 4 things up here, and you're saying it. What is it? And if that's not clear, it's going to confuse your reader. So every time you see pronouns, and he, it, they, make sure it's pointing to the subject. Is it clear to the reader what these pronouns are pointing to? So for anyone who decides to write their own books, I hope this gives you some good tips. And if you decide that you need help from the very beginning, or maybe just with the revising and editing, please call me, 561-282-9455. You can also email ghosthost@financeghostwriter.com.